let me ask you this. Is it bad to staunchly agree or, take a stand on something and not have, I mean, in my case, the words to like really articulate why I am for or against said thing?
Is it bad? That might be too strong. I think it's maybe problematic, and the reason why is because when you do that, you maximize the potential that you could fall prey to a dogmatic stance on something that you
Mm.
might be wrong about, right? And so
So I've
when you're
admitted,
dogmatic in something and you're wrong,
right,
that's when you get caught slipping. So insofar as you haven't insofar as you can't quite articulate it, the reason why you might not be able to is because you might be in error, or you might not have worked it all out to the point where it's like, no, like the position I have doesn't really fully make sense because I haven't accounted for this, I haven't accounted for that, which is one of the reasons why I
right,
live in the middle of most issues. Because what I'm constantly doing is reevaluating. Like, did I think about everything? Did I take
I
it all
mean,
into account? Do I understand both sides? And so that's why I kind of live in the middle. And I very rarely take a staunch position on things. Sometimes I do,
right,
and then when I do, every now and again I'll come back and revisit those. Like, okay, am I being dogmatic?
right,
Because I might be. Like I have a very staunch position against wokeness, but I'm constantly trying to figure out. Okay, there's some stuff that they say that I actually agree with, and I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
like give credence to it. But like, there's some stuff
They're
that they
just
say that
going about it the
I'm
wrong
not
way.
on board with that at all, and I don't think I ever will
Yeah,
be. Like, you know
yeah.
what I
I
mean?
know.
So
I do think with when it comes to wokeism or wokeness, there are some stances that I'm just like, I see where you're coming from. I just think you're going about it the wrong way. But anyway,
there you go.
I have admitted to, I mean, I don't know, I don't remember if I did it publicly, but I was talking to somebody one time, and I admit that I do, you know, I am pretty dogmatic. Like, I don't have the, what is it that people like to, um free mind, what is it, free
Free will.
thinker. I'm not, like, I can admit that I'm not a free thinker. Um, and I know that it's probably not popular to say. And that's probably not something you're gonna hear from someone on that, from someone that is right of center. But yeah, I don't I think there's some things I can
Well,
be free
what do
thinking
you mean by
with.
that? What do you mean you're not a free thinker? You don't think you think independently or critically
No,
about things?
okay. In the sense, I do think I know, I think independently, right? But a lot of my thinking stems from Christian
Okay.
values or
Okay. I understand
principles.
what you mean.
So like I mean, as long as have my belief in God and his teachings, there's just certain things I'm not going to budge on. And but then I also think that, like, when if I do bring God into it, and I sometimes I will and sometimes I won't, but people don't think that God and his teachings are a good enough reason for me to believe what I believe. And I didn't want to bring, Christianity into it, um as a reason as to why I'm so staunchly against the trans stuff. But that's essentially what it comes down to. Like, I do think that God had a reason and a designed everyone a very specific way, the way he wanted it to be, and we should be proud of who we are, who as who we were born as, right?
Mm.
And trying to change your gender or your sex goes against that for me. So if
What if you were born trans? Should you be proud of that?
I don't think anyone's born trans, man.
Okay. All right. All
But
right.
yeah,
I'll stop. But I wanted to go back to something because I mean we've
oh
gone
yeah,
over, but
go ahead.
I've been meaning to go back to this. So let's go back
Uh-huh.
to the minor attracted persons thing because
Okay.
we've deterred from that a while, and the discussion has been great, by the way.
Oh
So
no,
thank
yeah,
you
it's
for
wonderful.
that. So far be it from me to defend pedophiles, but I think some of the nuances I wanted to tease out earlier about your discussion about it, and this relates to the article more directly, is I think the move to quote unquote rebrand, as you call it, is to take into account the subset of people who have genuine sexual attractions to minors, to children, whatever you want to call them, um, through no fault of their own. That those inclinations that they have, those proclivities that they have, are not something that they decided.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's not the consequence of free choices that they're making. They genuinely feel these things, and there's a lot of social pressure not to act on them for obvious reasons. And so these people have a condition that they need to deal with, and the contention is, and it's a fairly understandable one, that the best approach to dealing with these people is to help them, not pathologize them, not disassociate them and cast them out into society because of the threat that we think that they are to children. That we should give them the help that they need, because it's actually really difficult to change one's sexual proclivities according to the latest and greatest science.
Uh-huh.
That's what I think that's what I think the impetus for it is. And if you understand that, then I think it's easier to understand this discourse in a way that's not so alarmist, which is what the tenor you went, because I think you really care about protecting children, and that makes sense. That's understandable. If you care about kids, you don't want kids to be harmed in such diabolical, devastating ways as to be
Yeah.
sexually abused by adults. No one wants that.
I love
That's the stuff
your
of
diction.
nightmares.
The
No,
diction.
but because I'm
Yeah.
emphasizing the thing we all feel. It's a visceral reaction. We don't
Mhm.
fuck with that shit. Like
Yeah.
motherfuckers that do that type of shit to kids get murdered in prison.
Yeah.
And these are motherfuckers that are murderers and thieves and shit.
Guillotine.
They don't even fuck with that shit. Like you don't do that shit to kids. Like that's off
Yeah.
limits. Even
Yeah.
them, even they have that code. So like, we just as a society, we just viscerally we don't like that shit. So I understand where you're coming from, and I get most people's visceral response to that, because fundamentally what they're reacting to is the threat that this has to children. So I get it, but like there's a question, and this is where the nuance comes in, of what's the best way to deal with people who have these proclivities, because some of these people don't act on them because those people are aware of the harm that can do, right? But at the same time, they can't just will these proclivities away. They can't just like wave their magic wand and like, okay, I don't feel this way anymore. They're like, no, I'm constantly feeling these urges. What do I do with these urges? I can't act on these urges. It's not only socially taboo, but it like I could fuck up kids' futures, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that guy. But like, bruh, I got these urges. What do I like? So,
Yeah.
what is the best way to approach that? And these people are trying to systematize forms of psychological and quasi medical care for these people. And part of that is getting rid of that stigmatization is to change language. That's what it's for. But the discourse is now talking about this change of language as if there's a more nefarious intent. And the nefarious intent is to normalize pedophilia, because that's ultimately what the LGBTQ plus community has always wanted anyway, because they're all deprived, because they're all unholy, etc. And I don't think that that's fair. So that nuance, I wanted to tease that out, because we need to be very careful about what we're accusing people of. First of all, gay people be the main ones that don't fuck with pedophilia. They don't want to be associated with that shit either. They been
Yeah.
trying to get rid of them associations for like from the jump, because once upon a time, to be gay meant that you had a certain kind of higher likelihood of becoming a pedophile, and that all you want is that the only way to recruit other gay people was to groom them as from a child, from childhood. And indeed, a lot of gay people have reported being abused as children, and that's a part of the discourse, and that's something that we need to agree with, because it is factual. But
Yeah.
not every gay person has that experience, though. That's not the thing that causes gayness 100% across the board. So, and that's what people typically, right of center, think, is they think that this is the manifestation of sin or unholiness or waywardness of or being secular, and that's not quite the best way to understand it either. That our sexual proclivities and how they form are actually way more complicated than that, both biologically and psychologically. And it's not quite clear exactly what it is that causes a person to be gay or straight. That the literature is actually like not clear on that. But the literature seems to be clear on one thing, which is that once you have your sexual proclivities, such as they are, it's really difficult to change them.
Get them to get rid of
Right.
them.
So all this pray away and the gay stuff doesn't seem to be very
I mean, it's not like
plausible.
you can pray away straight.
I mean, you can
It's
pray all day long. I'm a like women, bro. I don't care what I mean, you can do it,
yeah.
you can try, but like whatever, right? Like, and I'm not trying to be rude or whatever, but like, I mean, if you apply like whatever you're willing to say about gay people, if you applied it to your straightness, I
Yeah.
think a lot of times you would figure out like that doesn't make sense. So that it would be hard to attribute that to gay people, right?
Mm.
Like all of the and you know what's interesting?
What's interesting,
I
friend?
throw this out to the more religious types is because I really want to challenge them to think about this. Is all of the straight preachers and Catholic priests that were doing what they were doing with those little boys behind closed doors.
Mhm.
It's interesting that these people who are dead set on protecting children don't have nothing to say about that. That's like most of them would
But why
react
do
and
you,
say that those things are
why
bad
do
and
you
those Catholic priests should not be
why
priests
do
and
you think
everything.
they're not saying anything?
Well, I think all of their
And
focus is narrowly concerned with who they think are the enemy, which is usually people left of center. They think that the secular people are the enemies because they're evil and backward and wayward and stuff
I
like that.
think they got smoke for the left of center. They got smoke for the pastors and the priests that engage in those horrible activities. Like
I think that they would disapprove for
haven't
sure.
seen.
That part I agree with. But what I'm saying is all of their focus in terms of what they talk about are the examples that come from the wayward people. And it's almost as if they've forgotten about the scandals
I don't
with
think
all
they've
of those
forgotten.
pastors and
It's just,
priests.
I mean, I don't think they've forgotten. I think it's just convenient to talk about the left more.
But my point is that what I'm trying to problematize is the idea that this is the product of waywardness, unholiness, when it's like, bro, people in your side were doing
They're
this
also
too.
wayward and unholy.
Okay, fair enough, but they're Catholic priests though. I mean, they believe your faith too, even though they've
So
corrupted it,
okay,
even though they
so okay,
violated it.
hold on, because I do want to make this point. Like, okay, because right now I'm Catholic. Right now, I say right now because um I may I want to see if I want to test or visit other denominations of of churches, whatever.
Christianity.
Yeah. So um I'm fully aware that there are priests that have engaged in pedophilic behavior, but I don't know, like we alluded to this earlier, like I can't condemn the entire church for a select group of priests.
But you were just willing to condemn like all of teachers and education
No, I
for.
wasn't. No, I
Oh,
didn't. I
maybe I
I said,
misunderstood you. I
I
thought
mean,
that's what your contention was
no,
with this
because
teacher.
I was a teacher myself. So I can't, come on. I worked with teachers.
I misunderstood you. I apologize.
I
I
too
didn't
was
mean
a
to misattribute
teacher.
that to you. I apologize.
Yeah, I know. I may I thought I was clear. I mean, I said it's
Maybe
not
you were.
fair
I'll look at the
for
recording.
conservatives.
Maybe I falsely attribute something to you that I heard from someone else, and I
Oh,
apologize
okay.
if I
Yeah,
did.
yeah. I said it wasn't. I don't think it's fair that conservatives lump teachers in one category and assume that
You did say that.
they're
You
all
did say that. I
groomers.
remember that. Yep. I
Yeah, like
apologize again.
I
I
didn't think.
remember
No,
that.
that's it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I don't think that's fair to do. Even if I wasn't a teacher, like I don't think that's fair to just like, when people say, "Oh, all cops," like
All
the
cops are
whole
bastards.
the
A cab.
all
Fuck 12.
the all or nothing the all or
Yeah.
nothing rhetoric
Yeah. I agree.
is
I agree.
not fair, because I mean
I agree.
there is that nuance, there is that gray area. I mean, there is normal people want to talk in extremes all the time. I mean, again, I can take a staunch position on something, but then also know that there are people that are in whatever community that I disagree with, that don't agree with their own people, and I can fuck with that. So but yeah, I can't condemn the entire Catholic Church, because I mean I do like the mass. I do like the repetition. I like the peace that comes with it. I mean, I've been to other churches and but I mean that's not what we're talking about. But yeah, I can't but I also recognize that yes, these horrible things, and they're probably still happening
Hmm.
within the church. Um, but this is not me turning a blind eye to, address the other people that I definitely don't agree with. I think everybody, that anyone that engages in that kind of behavior is needs to be shamed. Which brings me to this point about you mentioned the stigma
Hmm.
of being a pedophile. Um, I think certain stigmas exist for a reason. And
Should you be stigmatized if you have predilections or inclinations towards sexual activity with minors that you don't act on as if you've acted on them?
how would we know? If you don't act on it, how would we know?
It, well, I don't know. You might You might
I can't I
you
can't
might you might you
I
might
can't
you might you might
stigmatize you for
demonstrate that you
something.
have that attraction in some way.
I don't how
You might have a bunch of pictures of a bunch of little boys and girls or some
well,
shit.
then that's you engaging, right? What?
Not if you no. You didn't engage in sexual activity just because you have pictures of
If
them.
you have
That's the
pictures
same.
of what? Wait, what specifically?
Children of children.
Doing what?
Just children, just regular child's pictures, just child's photos.
I have regular child photos on my
No, I know that,
computer.
but like I'm saying, if your action consisted of you just collecting, let's say from magazines or some shit, pictures
I
of
mean,
children
to me, that's
that you
too.
fantasize about, and they use you a
That's
way
not
that you
enough.
fantasize sexually, but you didn't do
That's
anything to any children,
that's not
would
enough
you
for me
condone?
as an outsider to know that that's what you're doing.
What I'm saying is that would be evidence that you had the predilections.
That
Okay,
is wild.
okay. If you want to make it more explicit, let's say you wrote,
That
"Dear
is
diary, I
wild.
fantasized about having sex with a 6 year old boy today. I didn't actually do it because I know that it's wrong, but I thought about it
Hypothetical,
though. I
hypothetical,
feel guilty."
hypothetical.
And let's say, well, I'm using it as a hypothetical because I don't know what the mind of a pedophile is
No,
actually
no,
like
no,
because
no,
I'm
no.
not one. But like,
I felt the need to say that because this is gonna be public. But go ahead.
okay,
I was
well, I
protecting
mean,
you.
I have the full length version of all of this shit, so I could clear my fucking name easily. But my point is, if we were able to get evidence that I had the predilection or I had the inclinations, the
Uh
sexual
huh.
proclivities, but I didn't act on them, would you treat me the same as a person
Oh,
who actually acted on them?
oh,
Would you want to stigmatize me even though I didn't act on it?
yes.
Okay, and I think that is an untenable position because there's a morally relevant distinction to be had between a person who has inclinations towards doing the wrong thing but doesn't do it, and a person who has the inclination and does it. And I think that we would recognize that in any domain.
Okay.
So, for
I
example,
mean,
I think that you would treat. I think that you would probably be. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I suspect you would treat a person who had an inclination towards cheating on their spouse but didn't act on it different from a person who had that inclination and then did it.
absolutely.
So that's one example of
Oh,
of
you
that
wait. You
principle.
said different. I would treat them different.
Yeah.
If no, no, I wouldn't. No, I've
What?
look, listen.
What?
I've
Please
had a
explain.
friend. Okay, let me land here. I've had a friend.
Don't use that clubhouse lingo on here. This is my podcast. No, I'm just
No,
joking. I'm
that's not
playing.
clubhouse
I'm
lingo.
playing. I'm playing. I'm playing.
Oh,
I'm playing. They do
but
say it on Clubhouse a lot though.
yeah, they do, but they got that from Nigerians. But anyway,
Y'all
that's
think y'all invented everything. Y'all take credit for everything. I'm sick of y'all.
but I had a friend actually tell me that you know, she doesn't really believe in monogamy, and that if she could, she would um cheat on her boyfriend given the if she was given the opportunity. And that made me look at her different. I didn't like, I mean, technically we're not really speaking right now, but I didn't I definitely looked at her differently.
But that's not
And
quite what I'm
that's what
saying.
I mean
Stating an
by
intention to do the wrong thing if you have the opportunity is also morally different than the two scenarios I presented. The two scenarios are: I have an inclination towards doing a bad thing, but I don't act on it,
uh-huh.
and I have an inclination towards doing the bad thing and I act on
And
it.
you do act on
You
it.
presented something as not only do I have an inclination towards doing it, but I have an intention that I'm expressing explicitly to do it
Okay, okay,
once I
you're right.
get the
Okay,
opportunity. That's
okay, you're
different.
right. You're right. But I feel like I personally would still, just knowing how my brain works, I would still treat it the same because I mean that's why sometimes ignorance is bliss. I mean, if I know that you have this inclination, even if you don't act on it, it's still in the back of my mind that you have this inclination. And knowing how, I mean, I don't know how pedophilia works, but knowing, having a little understanding of how it works, if if we're around a bunch of kids, I'm going to be, like my spidey senses are going to go haywire because I'm going to be looking at you to make sure like you don't act on what it is that you're suffering from. Do you get what I'm saying? Like it I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
there's a
treat you.
threat. You seem to be responding viscerally to the potential or the threat
Yeah, because there's still the potential. Even if you
because
say you're not gonna act on it, there's still a potential because
yeah.
I'm
So
I don't know what
it's
you're
the
liable to do.
well, yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that what you're responding to and why you would treat them the same is that they're both, as far for all intents and purposes, as far as you're concerned, they're 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 threats to the harm that you really don't want to be done being done.
What is it? Like, can I call it a recessive threat? Like dominant and recessive. Can I call it like a recessive threat? I just made up a word.
Maybe you can invent that term. I haven't analyzed how that might be misunderstood, but we can for I mean, yeah, we can coin that right now in the context of this discussion and say
You heard it here first. Recessive
it's a
threat.
dominant or a
Dominant
recessive threat.
and recessive
Maybe
threat.
yeah, actually maybe there are better terms to use, but we'll use that for right now. I just think that on some level you are still recognizing though that there's a morally relevant difference between a person who actually does a bad thing and a person who has an inclination towards doing it but doesn't do it. Right, those are not the same thing morally because the bad action never took place in the second case, and the bad action did take place in the first case, and so assessing them as morally on par with each other doesn't make sense. You seem
Yeah,
to
the
be saying
degree
that
of
you're going
my
to assess them,
reaction is going to.
but you seem to be saying something different. You're saying that you're going to treat them the same not because you think that they're morally equivalent, but you think that they are connected, they are sufficiently connected with the threat of a bad thing happening that it warrants you being on you're having your guard up.
So, okay, let me tweak it a bit. I wouldn't act the same. Like the threat, because the threat level isn't the same. What I'm saying is, if it's somebody that does have those thoughts that won't act on it, my spidey senses again will be tingling. If it's someone that
Well, no,
I
but you
know,
wait, hold on, but you
wait,
emphasized that you didn't know, like you
I thought
wouldn't
you,
be
I thought
able
the
to
scenario
tell.
was that I do know.
No, you no. So what I specified was one scenario is a person has an inclination, they don't act on it. A person has an inclination, they do act on it. That's the only thing I said that separates them. But I thought you emphasized that you really wouldn't know which is which. So that's why you would treat them the same. That's what I thought you were saying, but maybe I'm wrong.
I thought you were saying that, like, if I just so happen to know that they had these thoughts but don't act on them,
Or they haven't yet, is what you would
yeah, they
know.
haven't acted on them,
Yeah.
I would
But
still be
you
on
would
alert.
regard
But if
they
it was
could
someone that
because
has
you know that
acted on them, I would just call the cops. What? That, like, it's just it's just like,
no,
why
no,
are you
no.
here around kids?
Well, okay, fair
So
enough.
that
But
that's the response would be different because yes, you are. If I know that you are someone that has these thoughts but hasn't acted on them, I would just be on alert. But if I know that you are someone that has these thoughts and has acted on them, I'm calling the cops.
so what if they already went to jail and did their time and they're already
But
on
wouldn't they
the
be
Amber
registered
Alert?
as
Yeah, they already are.
Jason? You have to go through a background check to be in school, like
I,
around
I didn't
kids.
say anything about being in school. I'm saying if
Oh,
you
like if they're
knew,
just in the general public around kids.
yeah, yeah, you would treat them the same.
I would call the cops. I don't know if you've
What?
served
Why
your
would you
time.
call the cops on a person who already served their time and isn't
I don't
doing
know if
anything?
you've served your time, and I don't know who said that jail solves
What?
that issue. What?
I don't think
Jail
jail does
doesn't.
solve that issue.
Jail does
I'm
not remove that
no,
those
I'm
functions.
specifying things because I'm trying to give you a scenario in which the person has done the thing, but they're not actively doing the thing now. Because that's what I had in mind when I gave that example. So the person has done it in the past, right? Let's say they even got caught and convicted or whatever. There would be no real need to call the cops on them unless they're
Okay,
actually
so
doing it.
my actual reaction. I mean, okay, maybe I
But
was being a
but
little.
I thought your argument was you would treat them the same because in both cases they could potentially do it in one case again, in one case for the first time. That's what I thought you were saying. Are you not saying that? You would
I'm
be on
saying
alert in
that
both
I would
cases.
still be on alert in both.
Right.
If I
That's what I
didn't
thought you said.
know, I wouldn't be on alert. But if I do know, I would.
Right. I'm
That's
assuming
all
you
I'm
know.
saying.
I'm assuming
Oh,
you
you're
know in
saying
both
my no. Yeah,
cases.
I would just be
Yeah.
alert in both situations. The second one, however, like the first one, if I don't even know how I would know this, but let's say they just told me in confidence. then I
No,
wouldn't
you can
divulge
look
that
them up. If
information.
they have to be reported on what's it called? It I forgot what it's called. Is it
If
Amber?
they haven't
No,
acted on it,
no. If they
they have
have
to be
acted on
reported.
it, they have to register as a sex offender, and you can
Okay, but
pull
if
that
they
shit up.
haven't, then they're not registered, right?
Yeah, if they have it, yeah, because they
Okay.
didn't do anything.
So if they haven't acted on it, then I would just, and I just happen to know, I would just be on alert, but I wouldn't draw attention to the situation. If they have acted on it and other people, maybe other adults in the area that we are not aware, I would make the other adults aware, and then we would figure out how to handle the kids at that point.
Okay. So then you are making some
Without
distinctions, which I'm
without
actually
really
I'm actually
alerting.
surprised to hear now because I thought you were saying you wouldn't make any distinctions, but you are now. I think you're grappling with what I think are the morally relevant distinctions between the two cases, and
I could be
that's
nuanced.
justifying.
Hello, like
No, I
if
know,
we
but at first you
know it,
weren't. But the more you talked about it, the more nuance you got, which I appreciate. It's not a bad thing. But what I'm saying is, now that I'm hearing your answer, it seems like you're acknowledging what I was saying, which is that we wouldn't treat these cases the same, because on some level we would acknowledge that there's a morally relevant difference. It's not trivial between the two cases.
I think what I was thinking, because I mean, my stance didn't change as the conversation progressed. I think I just misunderstood what you were saying at first. Because in my head, if I don't know, okay, if I do know that you are this person and you don't act on it, like it's not for me to be the judge and the jury for you in that situation, especially if you haven't done anything to raise any alarm, right?
Okay,
So, but I still will be on alert if kids are present.
I get
Now,
it.
if I know that you've acted on it, then yeah, if I'm the only adult in this situation, I'm moving them kids away. If
I get
if
it.
if there are other adults, I'm gonna let them know what's going on, and then we all act accordingly.
Okay,
But
that
still,
makes sense.
but man, the Chris and because I have to bring it back to this, the Christian in me, I don't want to and I also don't want to alarm the kids, right? They don't know what's going on. So I don't want to draw attention to that person, whether or not they've acted on it or not. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but to me, it seems like you're flushing out the implications
The
of your
responsible response,
of your protective instinct as it regards what would be the most responsible
the
way to
most
handle it.
appropriate
Yeah,
response. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So, but I said all of that to the reason why I was trying to get you to kind of point out the morally relevant difference between the two cases is when it comes to the minor attracted persons, we're dealing with a case. Well, in a lot of these cases, we're dealing with people who haven't acted on it. And so we want to provide them the attention that they need to deal with the proclivities such that they don't act on it and minimize the likelihood that they do act on it by giving
So
them the help that they need.
would calling them maps help?
So part of what they're trying to do is destigmatize. So calling them pedophiles when they
So
haven't
you don't
acted
think
on it
that
is in some sense.
destigmatizing would would increase the inclination for them to act on it now that
I
you've
think
kind of
I think in
removed
certain
the power
scenarios,
from.
I think in certain scenarios it could. But what I'm trying to flesh out their motivations. They have very specific motivations for these moves. And it is possible, consistent with these motivations, as well
And
meaning as
you
they may
don't think
be,
that
that they could
you
have
think that
negative
there
consequences that are
are
unintended.
non-nefarious.
So you got to let me get there. I'm on my way to getting there. You keep skipping. So what I'm saying
Right.
is, I'm trying to flesh out what their intentions are. Okay, however well
Uh-huh.
meaning and even however naive they may be. The intention here is to destigmatize the fact that a person has these inclinations because there's something morally distinct about just having the inclinations that you don't act on and having the inclinations and acting on them, right? And they're trying to take into account the involuntary nature of having the inclinations in the first place, particularly if you didn't act on them, right? And getting those people help has a certain kind of relationship with minimizing the likelihood that those people are going to actually act on them in dysfunctional, toxic ways that we all don't want because it harms children irreparably in many cases, right? We don't want the abuse. So that's the intent. Now, there's a further discussion to be had, and I think it's a fair question, it's a fair set of questions to have to ask about whether or not these kind of policy positions, let's say, uh, are going to have negative unintended consequences in terms of making it easier for actual pedophiles with nefarious intentions to move about in the world and hide amongst the LGBTQ community.
You know it
Now
will.
that's a part. So that's a part of the discussion. But what I think we need to be careful about doing is just presuming that that's going to be the ultimate outcome,
Come on,
because
come on, come on,
there's a
come
way
on,
in
come
which hold on there's a way in which you can approach this where that doesn't necessarily happen.
on.
So
Okay.
that's part of the discussion. And so like that, I'm trying to get you to see all of it as opposed to just honing in on the thing that a lot of people right of center are
Listen,
arguing.
trust me. I like you did bring, and you did bring something to this conversation that I didn't quite think of. But I before I brought this, you know, article up, I did think about, them. I did think about, again, their good intentions. I did. I did. Because I really do try to do that before I, you know, go off. But like, I still don't think that I see, if you're trying to destigmatize something, that you will allow those people that need the help to actually go seek it, because you're removing the shame from what they're like, what they're going through, right? Because I mean, because otherwise we wouldn't know. I mean, I personally don't know any pedophiles or people that have these thoughts, right? Like,
Not
and
that you know of.
right, and
Pedophiles don't typically broadcast that
respectfully,
because our
honestly,
culture is not very amenable to that shit.
I want to keep it that way. I want to keep it that way. Like, I really don't know. Like, I
But
did walk.
all sexual inclinations that are taboo are not usually not broadcast that way.
Right. And
Yeah.
on the one hand, I do think that I these people need help. I do think that they should be able to seek that help without,
Stigmatization.
no, without no, without, you know,
You don't see how stigmatizing them is antithetical to them seeking help.
I know, but it's like, I don't think there's a net benefit here by destigmatizing and changing language to accommodate them not wanting to feel stigmatized. I just don't think the
No,
benefit.
I understand that you disagree, but do you understand the rationale
I
at the
do,
very least? Okay.
but I don't think that it's a net positive to
Okay,
destigmatize.
I fair enough. I think that there's a case to be made against this, but I to just to stamp it for
There
the
probably
audience
is.
to name it, and you probably already know this already, but just to stamp it for the audience, the rationale is fairly simple. It's that if you destigmatize the thing, then people are going to be way more likely to seek help for the
Yeah.
thing, right? And this is we see this in the context of drug destigmatization, drug like like hard narcotics and stuff like that. Decriminalization is a part of the destigmatization because people are going to
How's
be more
that?
likely to seek
How's
help.
that going, by the way?
Not very well. I don't know how successful they have been at destigmatizing it or
Interesting.
decriminalizing it, but in places like where I live, shit's problematic because what they've effectively done is they've enabled people who are addicted to very strong drugs to get the purest, safest versions of those drugs and to be strung out and stay homeless
You
in the middle of
don't
San Francisco.
say.
So very well intended but negative inadvertent consequences here in San Francisco, and
Mhm.
was to the point where woke DAs like Chesa Boudin got fucking kicked out because of his stance on that kind of thing. Um, Actually, he got kicked out more because of his stance on not prosecuting things that are like
The
fucked up, violent crimes and shit.
people that sleep with, do underage. Is that the what
No,
bill is
Chesa
that?
Boudin didn't. He didn't prosecute a lot of things that are, but they were under the same kind of rationale, which is like things that are only moral crimes that are non-violent offenses, like being struck out, like using drugs, for example. We won't criminalize people for that and put them in jail forever because the best way to do it is to give them the drugs so that they don't overdose and allow them to seek help and offer them the help. A lot
So
of
you
times,
see
what people
why
do
I
is
feel
they
like
don't seek the help; they just get the free drugs. They
you see
strung out.
why I see like do you see why I don't think that
Yeah,
destigmatization
I was
would
trying to
work?
steel man your side, but I was just I'm also at in the same in the process of that, I was trying to articulate what I think the rationale is, and I think the rationale is somewhat reasonable, if not also naive, which is that yeah, if you destigmatize things, then people will feel less ashamed about it, and they'll be more likely to be bold in getting help for it. That's one obstacle that you're avoiding, right? But what I think is naive about it is it doesn't take into account the people who are going to maximize or take advantage of the fact that you're providing. Well, in the case of the drugs, you're actually providing drugs. So you're enabling their habit, which is stupid in a lot of different ways. I think obviously so. But in the case of destigmatizing sexual proclivities, you're not really enabling it because you're not providing them with opportunities to have sex with children. So that it does there's not quite the analogous drawback. But the
Yeah,
idea
but
is
you're
if you
removing
destigmatize it, then you can have people like that are more willing to like come out, admit to the relevant medical professionals or psychiatric professionals that they have these inclinations so that they can seek help and then not be demonized for it. That's what I think that they're trying to do. And there's
question. Do
similar
you
I
think
think there's similar things about HIV and destigmatizing men having sex with men because um, that was one of the things that was correlated very highly with getting HIV at one point, or even monkeypox is a more recent example
mhm.
that's highly correlated with men having sex with men. And so destigmatizing that is has a positive correlation with the likelihood that people will come forward, report that they have that, and then help us minimize that from spreading. So there is some credence to the rationale, to be fair. But there's all kinds of things that we can say about whether or not policies built on that rationale are actually going to be effective. Some of them probably will be more effective than others, if that makes sense.
I don't think this will be effective, but
You don't think destigmatizing the
I
sexual
don't think
proclivities for
destigmatizing
minors is
I
going to
don't
raise the
think
likelihood that people will come forward and get help for it, and then
I don't
reduce
think
the amount of pedophilia in our
destigmatizing
society?
I don't think destigmatizing anything that we know to be evil or negative works in the long run. No.
So there's no situation in which
Because
destigmatization has helped.
we know that the ones that act that even if they don't have the intention to act on it, eventually do probably will act on it and take advantage of the whole thing. And by that time, we've destigmatized it so much that people are going to provide. Oh, they had sex with a kid. Oh, well, such is life.
Do you think that? Do you
Now,
think that? Do you think that the
hopefully not.
stigmatization? Do you think that the stigmatization associated with COVID early on minimized the amount of people that came forward and got tested?
What was the stigmatization with COVID? Which one are
People
you?
presume that if you got COVID, that you were irresponsible, that you were a Trump supporter, that you didn't wear masks, etc. At some
Oh,
point early
really?
in the pandemic, yeah, and that you were being
I didn't
irresponsible,
pay attention. I
and that
wasn't
you were
paying
killing
that much.
grandma. Now, it might not have been it might not. I don't have like statistical data about what percentage of the population thought this. There were people who thought this clearly, and they were on social media for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But they may have been a minute fraction of the population who actually thought this. What I was trying to explore with you was: do you think that a significant amount of the population stigmatizing people who get COVID in this way is going to have a positive effect in terms of maximizing the amount of people who come forward and get tested, or is it going to have a negative effect, meaning it's going to minimize the amount of people who come forward and get tested because they're afraid of the judgment and the stigma that's going to be associated with it?
I mean, is it weird for me to say that I don't think it should have been a stigma in the first place for people that
No,
just
no,
wanted?
it's not weird, and in fact, that helps the point I'm making, which is the stigma. First of all, there shouldn't have been because people are getting sick, and a lot of times people get sick
Yeah.
like accidentally, like that's how sickness works. But but what I was trying to get you to recognize was there's a I think undeniable relationship between stigmatizing particularly illnesses and people's willingness to admit that they have symptoms of it or that they have it, right? When an illness is highly stigmatized, people are less likely to come forward and get tested, and that has all kinds of deleterious effects on our ability to control it in the population. When you destigmatize it and you make it sound like, hey, it's not a big deal if you have it, we're gonna get you fixed up, right? Like it's not a big deal. Nobody's going to judge you. Like people are more comfortable coming forward when they suspect that they have it. And it can help us control the spread of it in the population. So that's one example or demonstration of how this principle works. And I think that in the domain of communicable diseases, this clearly is a valid principle. You don't want to stigmatize illnesses insofar as it has a special relationship with people not being willing to come forward and say that they haven't when they have it. You want to destigmatize, and that's a great policy position. So that logic, that rationale is being applied to people who have this inclination towards sexual activities with minors. They're saying if you destigmatize it, then it's going to maximize the amount of people who come forward and admit that they have those inclinations so they can seek help. And there's less of them in the population who we don't know about. That's the rationale. To me, at first glance, that seems like a pretty reasonable, understandable thing to think. Now, you can still have your cake and eat it too, in the sense of saying, but implementing that policy position or instantiating that rationale into a certain policy position is not going to have the effect that we intend for XYZ reasons. You can still
Hmm.
argue that, but can you at least acknowledge the rationale seems kind of valid?
Yeah, I can acknowledge that.
That didn't change your mind at all.
I mean, no, because to me, maybe it was your example, because to me, COVID or any illness, I mean,
What about HIV? HIV was definitely stigmatized at first. People thought that if you had
well, it
HIV,
was
that means you had,
stigmatized
that
because
implied that
it
you
was
had gay sex at
stigmatized
one point.
because they literally said you would die if you contracted it, right?
No,
Like,
that's part of it, but also it was associated with the gay community, and at a time where being gay was still problematic by and large. So like it was stigmatized in
so
the
that
sense that
it naturally.
people, particularly men who got it, were presumed to have had gay sex. When Magic Johnson got it, people accused Magic Johnson of having had sex with Arsenio Hall.
Well, we don't know.
We
I mean,
okay,
I've
fair
never.
enough. But my
Wait.
point is that
This is my first
the
time hearing that. By the way.
suspicion was pejorative, and it was that's an example of the stigmatization. And when you can possibly receive that kind of flack for having HIV, in general, people in the population are less likely to come forward and get tested for it because they don't want that flack. It's the same thing also when it comes to victims of sexual assault. One of the reasons why they want to destigmatize women coming forward in the context of the Me Too movement is because the stigmatization of demonization of women who come forward against men is actually deterring women who have actually been sexually assaulted from coming forward and bringing those perps to justice. It's an application of the same principle.
Okay. I mean, I guess I didn't view. God, I hate when you do that. I guess I didn't view. I don't view. I mean, the last example you gave, I didn't view being a victim of sexual assault as a stigma. I guess.
Well, the stigma is to women who come forward and make allegations against, in particular, rich and powerful men, right? That
I mean,
that they're somehow more likely to be lying, that they're trying to gain something from the men. What the way people treated Amber Heard. Now, my part of it might have been justified in her case in particular, but people were willing to treat her like that before they even knew the details because they think that women lie fundamentally about these kinds of things in order to gain something from men. That particularly the
women.
rich and
I mean,
powerful men
women
that they
do
lied
lie.
that they are alleged to have lied
Unfortunate.
about.
It's unfortunate. I mean, women do
Some
lie though.
women do lie, but all women don't. And what I'm saying is part of the stigma is the presumption that any particular woman who's coming forward is lying. It's pervasive in our society.
I agree. I mean, I tend to just look at what you're saying and look at, whatever facts are presented before I jump to the conclusion on whether you're lying or not. But I mean, honestly, none of us will ever really know. But okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. I still, to me, it still doesn't apply to the pedophilia.
All right. But you're gonna have to come up with some better reasons than I just disagree. Like on what, like why would it
Well,
be?
I already said it because I think destigmatization is not going to produce a net benefit.
You think destigmatization is going to contribute to pedophiles basically being able
They're
to
going to
move
take
a bit
advantage. Like, this
freely.
is something that they want to do. They want to do it. The only reason they don't is because of the stigmatization.
Okay.
So if you
You
remove
just say
it,
that. You just say that. You just say that. You just say that.
yeah,
Okay. All right. We got to wrap it up. This has been a phenomenal discussion. How do you feel about it?
this was great. It was
Right?
amazing.
Right?
See, I'm smiling.
There
I
you
got a
go.
little dimple.
I feel excited vibes now. Because at first I was like, you excited? You're like, eh. But now I
Okay,
actually feel like
I said, you know what? Let me show my excitement now. Now,
okay.
this was great. You're a phenomenal host, and I hope people enjoy all of the discussions that we've had today. And I learned a couple of things, you know, and that's what I love about these kinds of conversations. You know, it's good to not always be in an echo chamber of people that, you know, are yes men. You
Mhm.
want to be with, you know, you want to talk to people that don't necessarily agree with you,
Mhm.
because you learn some things, even though, like, I haven't really budged on any of my stances today. It was great to
I
hear.
planted the seeds though. I
Yeah,
planted
yeah,
the
yeah.
seeds.
Well, they're not gonna grow. I mean, but
They're not
I
gonna
mean,
grow. Hey, let
I
them
mean, I
grow.
told you why earlier,
Let
but
them grow. Let them grow.
no,
Let
like
them
some,
germinate,
and
percolate.
no, this is. I mean,